As a tribute to its very first honorary citizen, Canada has named January 17th Raoul Wallenberg Day. Every year, on this date, 3 Canadians of Hungarian descent recall how they were saved by the man known as the Angel of Budapest.
Oh, I think of him every day. Very, very... I can't forget him. He's like a part of my life. It's so important to me, because if he wouldn't come on that time, on that moment, I want to be alive.
Wallenberg saved our life some minimum 3 times, but we cannot even say how many times. Well, we've saved our own life many times as well, but that's another thing.
I admire him. He's my hero. I think he is a real human being. He is the kind of human being why God created man.
It's impossible really to tell exactly how many people he saved, but maybe 100,000. One person can make a tremendous difference, and that is something that we all have to learn.
And we will light a few candles in memory of Wallenberg. And I have a few candles here because this is for my parents, your grandparents, who they saved. And this is for all the people who died. We will have a few seconds of silence, remembering him and praying for wherever he is for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Je veux dire merci.
Across Canada on January 17th, 2005, other events were held to ensure that the mystery surrounding Raoul Wallenberg's disappearance would not be forgotten.
And to do so on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the disappearance of Raoul Wallenberg, whom the United Nations referred to as the greatest humanitarian of the 20th century. Raoul Wallenberg was our first honorary citizen. We're amongst the few countries that have set aside a day every year to commemorate Raoul Wallenberg's humanitarian legacy, and now being the 60th anniversary of his disappearance does give us a certain standing to try to use this as an inspirational legacy for the world throughout.
January 17th is not the anniversary of Raoul Wallenberg's birth, nor of any of his many achievements. It's the anniversary of his disappearance. January 17th...
He is a person who was victim of the human rights violations. He inspired us to fight for human rights, and we must use that inspiration to fight for his human rights.
David Matus is a Winnipeg lawyer who specializes in cases involving human rights. And for the past 30 years he has dedicated much of his energy to attempting to shed light on the fate of Raoul Wallenberg, last seen in Soviet custody January 17th, 1945. By making Wallenberg an honorary citizen, Canada has claimed the right to demand that any nation be held accountable for the fate of this citizen, just like any other. International law makes it illegal for Wallenberg's fate to remain unknown. Armed with this right, David Matus went to Russia in 1996 to carry on his search. So far, though, he has not succeeded, because Russia has refused him access to its archives. On this 60th anniversary of Wallenberg's disappearance, a Canadian film crew took along 2 Budapest Holocaust survivors, Maria Gomori and her son Andrew, both now living in Winnipeg.
It's the 4th balcony we live.
So it was right beside that window.
Above the balcony where the flowers are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was...
And
that
you were
was
right by the edge of the...
Yeah.
Ezen az épületen, hogy itten megcsinálták, befestették.
He's interested whether they were shots in the house or not.
Mindenek egy szép dolog.
Igen.
Tehát akkor is egy szép.
He said it's a nice thing that we come back.
Melyik részén laknak Kanadában?
Winnipegbe.
Winnipeg, igen.
Ez a közepén.
Canada.
Igen, a közepen.
Igen. You
That I
remember the
don't
inside
remember.
as you look in?
But I do remember that at 6 o'clock in the morning, I had to come down and there were soldiers here and I could never go back.
Yeah. And you have to leave me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also brought along David Matas, whose main purpose in Budapest was to revive the investigation.
This is the place where Wallenberg worked. It was the embassy of Sweden. It was the place he left to go to meet the Russians. It's the place where he was last seen in public. It's the place where the mystery of the disappearance of Raoul Wallenberg begins. The honoring of Raoul Wallenberg never ceases, but the fact of helping him is almost forgot. The governments that have honored him have put a lot more effort into remembering them than to trying to help him. And as a human rights activist, I say to myself, we've got to do something, even at this late date, to try to help him and his family, because his fate to this day remains unknown.
In March 1944, Nazi Germany decides to invade Hungary, a former ally of the Reich, which is now ready to defect. Hitler can already feel that he's losing part of the war. Hungary has 750,000 Jews, and Hitler sends in Eichmann, his point man in the final solution. In just a few months, Eichmann will send at least 450,000 Jews to Auschwitz, especially those living in the Hungarian plain. In Budapest, another 300,000 fear the worst. The Angel of Death keeps up a hellish pace.
Alors, pour Eichmann, la chose la plus importante de sa vie était de tuer le plus juifs possible. Il voulait gagner au moins la guerre contre les juifs. Les ministres du gouvernement de Croix-Rouge, ils ont fui déjà Budapest. Alors ici, restaient seulement les subordonnés, alors ils n'ont respecté rien.
In the last months of 1944, the Germans and the Hungarian militias rounded up hundreds of Jews on a daily basis and took them through the streets to the banks of the Danube. There, they were bundled and tied up together to save bullets. A few shots, and the human bales were tipped into the icy waters. The inhabitants of Budapest were accustomed to calling it the Red Danube. At this point, a spirit of pure humanity appears who will stand up against Eichmann's madness. A diplomat from Sweden will in a few short months manage to save 100,000 Jews from certain death. This is the story of Raoul Wallenberg, the Angel of Budapest.
You were, how old were you? 1.5 when I was taken away.
Okay.
In this whole area, everybody who was in a Yellow Star house had to come down at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was the Hungarians and the Germans.
Yeah.
And I came down and I said, yeah, but I have a baby up there. Whatever happens to Jewish babies is going to happen to him. That's what they said. Well, you can imagine how I felt. I was helpless. Yeah, I couldn't go back. And basically it was really better because those people who had their baby with them, they should shot them on the road.
Großer Langer!
Itt vagyok. Danke.
Wallenberg est très fameux parce que il était kidnappé après la guerre au dernier mois au janvier 1945 par les Russes.
Wallenberg has acquired even greater heroic status by virtue of the fact that he was first taken prisoner by the Soviets, despite having saved so many, then lost sight of to this very day. David Matas, continuing his battle for human rights around the world, reminds us that the silence surrounding the Wallenberg affair continues to be completely illegal under international law.
What we have is a new legal framework that was not in place at the time that Wallenberg disappeared. I mean, Wallenberg disappeared in 1945. We didn't have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights till 1948, and since that time we've seen a burgeoning of international human rights standards. What these standards as well do is give a sensitization, a verbalization of the wrong that was committed. And we can say that this wrong is a continuing wrong, that disappearance is a continuing wrong, as long as the disappearance remains unexplained.
Understanding the problem of human rights can only come through education. For this reason, the Asper Foundation of Winnipeg has set up a Holocaust awareness program. The foundation each year finances a trip for young Canadian students to visit the Holocaust Museum in Washington, at least until the opening of the Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg in the near future.
This program is to teach students, using the example of the Holocaust, show them how easy it is to lose your freedom if you're not vigilant, and to make them understand how blessed they are to live in Canada, and to make them understand that they have a responsibility to ensure that Canada remains a country of freedom.
On their visit to Washington, these young people meet Congressman Tom Lantos, himself a Holocaust survivor, who tells them his own story.
There isn't any place to go learn about Rwanda. There isn't any place to learn about the cultural genocide of the Aboriginal people in Canada. So there are horrible atrocities that have happened in the world. It so happens that this place is so graphic and so well done that it serves as a great learning tool, as a stepping board to the real issues of what are we doing in the world today.
In 1944, Americans, especially those of Jewish descent, were well informed of the horrors being carried out in Europe, and they wanted at all costs to try and do something to save as many Jews as possible. The US created the War Refugee Board, whose mandate was to provide financial and logistical support to any relief effort that might help Jews in Europe.
It really started when Raoul was in Haifa, because there he started meeting some refugees who were leaving Germany, who were fleeing away from Germany, who told him about the persecution of Jews. So then he started really to understand something was going on. So they were looking after a man who would agree to go to this hell, and the company where Raoul was working was in the same building as the American embassy. In fact, they met, and he was employed for that mission, but also he had wanted to make this kind of mission without having the contacts to do so. So the Swedish king gave him a diplomatic passport, because of course he was an architect and a businessman and didn't have any education to be a diplomat, but he negotiated the conditions on which he would like to do this work and got this diplomatic passport for 6 months.
Il était le dernier parmi les diplomates qui est arrivé à Budapest, qui était ici. Par exemple, Angelo Rotta, le nonce apostolique, était ici déjà depuis des années. Karl Lutz était déjà ici depuis 1942. Mais Wallenberg était le plus jeune, et il est arrivé le dernier. Mais Wallenberg était parmi eux l'un des plus braves, vraiment.
Wallenberg's nieces, Louise van Dordel and Marie Dupuis, live near Paris. They explain the origins of this exemplary destiny.
So he was born into a very powerful banking family called the Wallenberg family, and he was married to my grandmother, whose name was Mai, like the month of May. And it was very unfortunate, because just a few months after their marriage, her husband Raoul died, and that was just a few months before the baby's birth. A few months after the death of the father, his grandfather, the father of my grandmother, died. So in fact, his 5 first years, he was brought up by 2 widows in black.
At the time, the Wallenberg family was the most powerful in Sweden. In 1944, they already owned at least 50 companies and employed over 200,000 people. Their income was several $billion a year. They included bank and factory owners, as well as diplomats and businessmen involved in several European countries.
So Gustavo was quite a special person, because he was from this powerful family, but he was also a visionary. So he had lots of initiatives in his life, thinking about communication and things like that. And for him, it was very important to create some kind of network in the world. He was kind of leading the education of his grandson, who he loved a lot. For Gustav, the main thing was to remain a free man. So he told Raoul not to get married early, not to get into a profession or into a career. And he told him, try to learn as much as you can from books, from your experiences, learn about harmony and about people. And don't get into any profession before you are 30. When you'll be 30, you'll know what you want to do, what is your mission in life.
The main stratagem used by this new diplomat in his campaign to save Jews was the creation of a false Swedish passport called a Schutzpass. The Schutzpass asserted that the bearer was a Swedish citizen being repatriated to his homeland. In only a few months, Wallenberg will issue thousands of Schutzpasses. One of the first people to receive such a passport was Dr. Erwin Koranyi of Ottawa.
And then I heard some crazy thing I couldn't believe, that a Swedish diplomat came to Budapest and he is trying to save some Jews. In the first visit he said that, do you have any Swedish connection? Anything is good. I couldn't think of it, and then it occurred to me that my father, years before, began to have a business contact with a Swedish company. So I told Wallenberg, yes, we have that. He says, wonderful, that's enough. He gave a Schutzpass to me, to my parents, to my sister, and to my wife, Alice, who didn't know anything but was in this camp waiting to be transported to Auschwitz. Another 2 days later, policeman comes up to her and says, well, you can go home, you are a Swedish citizen. She thought that the policeman is crazy. I couldn't believe it. But she and altogether five of them were brought to Budapest, to the Swedish embassy, to Raoul Wallenberg, and I was waiting for there, and she was allowed to go.
There is a very famous moment of the Wallenberg saga. There were prepared about 800 youngsters between 16 and 30 years for deportation. And one of the non-Jewish collaborators, the colonel of Gendarmerie Paradi, gave notice to Wallenberg that there is an action going on at Józsefváros railway station. We arrived there, and Wallenberg telling that those people who have lost their Schutzpass should come here. And of course, the people who have had some brain, at least 300 from the whole crowd, they were coming in the other corner, and then we were staying there with empty papers. And we were reading well-known Jewish names. And always was coming somebody. And there on the place were filled the Schutzpasses and stamped without photos. Wallenberg told them, come next day to the embassy, we should put your photos in the... They were just keeping.
À Budapest, au moment quand les croix fléchées ont pris le pouvoir, il y avait à peu près 250 000 Juifs. Szálasi a fait organiser 2 ghettos à Budapest, le ghetto international où il y avait à peu près 35 000 personnes. Dans le grand ghetto, autour de la synagogue de Dohanica, il y avait 70 000 personnes. C'était ici le ghetto international, ou autrement dit le ghetto protégé. Ghetto protégé entre guillemets parce que ici il y avait des bâtiments que les différents diplomates, par exemple Raoul Wallenberg, fait sous son protection plus que 10 différents bâtiments ici. Ici sur les bâtiments, il y avait des plaques que 7 bâtiments est sous la protection de la Suède, ou de la Suisse ou le Vatican. Et ici, le numéro 6, c'était le centre des policiers qui a fait organiser la distribution des Juifs de Budapest. Ici, vous pouvez imaginer maintenant, quelques milliers de personnes habitent assez aisément dans ces appartements luxueux. Mais à l'époque, c'est plus que 35 000 juifs habitaient ici dans un état horrible. Mais quand même, c'était un endroit où tout le monde, les juifs non protégés, voulaient vivre.
If you look at my defense passport, but he issued the Schutzpass, the number on it is 160, something like that. So I was one of the first one who got it. He himself didn't know. He just arrived to Budapest. He just was trying to find out what's going on. But you see, he learned very fast. When he got this permission to save 1,000 people, he issued 5,000. When he reached the 5,000, he printed another 25,000, and so on and so forth. A man so full of energy and so full of determination that it was simply amazing. He was an incredible fighter.
The Wallenberg mystery and the violations of international law, which are all part of the file, are carefully explained to visitors at the Jewish Museum in Budapest, located in the same building as the Great Synagogue, which still reigns supreme over the heart of the former ghetto. David Matus sees it as a precious resource, giving him the energy he needs to continue his investigations into the truth about what happened to Wallenberg. For him, the wall of silence maintained by the Russians is unacceptable in this day and age. Susan Vadney of Montreal describes the horror she lived through at 41 Katonga Yosef Street, very near the Danube. She tells how one morning Wallenberg showed up and pulled her out of a death march that would have led her to Auschwitz.
We were taken downstairs. They said everybody, the whole building has to come out and wait in the line. There was a very, very long line. Thousands of people are waiting there. Suddenly a black limousine showed up, and that was Wallenberg's car. And he got out of the car, and with an interpreter he spoke to the Nazis that the people who have the Schutzpass with his signature should get out of the line and go home because they are under his protection. So at that time the Nazi officers accepted it and said, okay, people showed the paper, my father showed the 3 paper, and we were able to get out of the line and go back home. Here is a man like in the opera, Lohengrin is coming to save Elsa from Wagner's opera Lohengrin, that she was in trouble and he came in the last moment to save her life.
Simon Wiesenthal brings the story to the United States. His press release is read by Tom and Annette Lantos. They were teenagers in Budapest when they were saved by Wallenberg. They assumed he was dead. They start looking for a way to mobilize American opinion. President Carter is hosting a nationwide radio show. Annette Lantos calls the president.
I told basically the president that my husband and I were saved by him. He saved 100,000 other innocent lives. He was taken by the Russians. He has been kept in captivity, and the Russians claim he's dead, but we know we have overwhelming evidence that he's alive. Would the president please try to obtain his release from captivity?
President Carter tries. But Wallenberg is not an American citizen, so there's little he can do.
That we do not forget that Raoul Wallenberg will not be abandoned by America.
In 1980, Tom Lantos is elected to Congress. He proposes that Raoul Wallenberg be made an honorary American citizen, an honor previously given only to Sir Winston Churchill.
He undertook his mission at the behest of the United States with American funds, and there is no doubt in my mind that the decades of his imprisonment in the Gulag are directly related to the false Soviet assumption that he had been an American spy. So in the spring of 1981, I introduced legislation to make him an honorary citizen of the United States.
On October 5th, 1981, President Reagan signs the document making Raoul Wallenberg an honorary American citizen.
Raoul Wallenberg is the Swedish savior of almost 100,000 Jewish men, women, and children. Today there is evidence that he is still imprisoned by the Soviets. Wherever he is, his humanity burns like a torch.